we're gonna get started. So welcome everyone to Chef Liron Cooks. We're here in the Sturda Family Teaching Kitchen in Blaise Bernstein School of Culinary Arts. And we're gonna work on pizzas today. So I'm gonna get started a little quickly with the first two things that kind of need to cook a little bit. And then we'll have a little bit more time to talk a little slower about it. So the first thing that we're going to do is the cauliflower crust. So for the cauliflower crust, in the recipe, I wrote there 12 ounces. Currently, the one I did today is from a bag from, where was it? Trader Joe's. The bag from Trader Joe's is a 16-ounce bag, so I measured out the 12 ounces and put it into this glass bowl. I microwaved it for about 5 minutes, and then when it cooled off, I kind of pressed it with a bunch of paper towels to get all the water out. Most of the water out, at least. When I was doing this was also with the Club J Kids. So what I used, if you buy in Costco, their rice cauliflower, it's in the frozen section. The big bag comes with 4 smaller bags inside, and you can just steam it in the bag itself, and each bag is exactly 12 ounces. So you can go ahead and just steam it in that bag, and once it cools, do the same thing, just get all the water out of it. So that's very useful, and you can just take the bags out and use each one at a time. You don't have to defrost it. You just want to make sure that you've microwaved it enough so that the cauliflower is soft and it's not hard anymore. So we have here our cauliflower. I'm going to add everything else to it. So we have our 1 egg. Cheese. We have dried oregano and dried basil, kosher salt, and we have powdered garlic and onion. And of course, I mean, if there's other seasoning that you like, go ahead and add it. You really don't have to stick to this seasoning. If you really like garlic, add a little bit more garlic. You can play around with it. All right, and I'm gonna mix that around. You can use a spatula, you can use your hand. Eventually I am going to use my hands. So you can go ahead and use it to begin with. It's totally all right. And you can either do one big pizza, or if you're doing this for a few different people, you can split it up into smaller amounts and do smaller pizzas and have each one make their own smaller pizza. That's also good. All right, so mixing this all together. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just put this onto the baking sheet with the parchment. All right, and I'm just gonna pat it down into a circle. So you can see it's already kind of a thicker consistency. It sticks together very well. And that's the egg and the cheese that's helping for that. Okay, getting all of it off. Okay, and now I'm just going to make a circle. So I'm going to start off with a circle so that when I pat it down, it's easier to keep that circle, but you really don't have to keep it as a circle. And this is going to be pretty thin. It's not, we don't want it that thick. And the thinner it is, also the faster it'll bake. And basically for the cauliflower crust, we are just cooking it all. We're baking the crust on its own. And at the end, we're just going to put the cheese, the sauce and cheese, and just having that melt. And we're not going to be adding, we're not really cooking the crust once it's done. All right, so I have here a nice round. And I'm going to put that in the oven. All right, so I'm going to put this in the oven at 425 degrees. I'm going to set a timer for about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to look at it. Once it's golden enough, I'm going to flip it over. That way you can see how I'm flipping it over. And it's going to do 2 things. One, it's also going to bake the bottom of it. but it's also going to separate it from the parchment so that it's not going to stay stuck to the parchment, and it'll be much easier once you cut it to get the slices when you want to serve it. This is going to go into the oven at 425. All right. And the next thing that we're going to start with, I'm just going to put a timer before I forget. All right, that's going to yell at us. The next thing we're going to start with is the garlic confit, because the garlic confit needs about 30 minutes to cook. So I do have one that I already finished, but we're going to start, and that way you're going to see how it starts and the cooking process. You're going to see it cooking on the stove top. So it's really just 2 ingredients. I have here about 2 heads of garlic that I peeled and cut off the ends, and about a cup of extra virgin olive oil. You can use regular olive oil if you'd like. And I'm putting the garlic down. And then what we want to do is we just want to cover all the garlic with olive oil. So it's, you know, it's not an exact amount in the recipe because you want to make sure that it's all covered. So I see that I still have a little bit that needs to get covered. So I'm going to go ahead and pour a little bit more. This one. All right, so I just want to make sure it's all nice and covered. All right. And then we can turn it on. We're going to bring it to a low simmer. And once it's gone to that simmer, I'm going to lower the heat down. And then it's just going to keep on cooking for about 30 minutes until it is soft. Right, so we're going to keep that going. And I actually have here some garlic confit that I already made. So this is, I reserved the oil from the garlic confit, and you can refrigerate this and keep it for up to 2 weeks if you like that garlicky flavor. You can add it to things instead of just regular olive oil. We're going to also use this to brush the dough on top instead of just the regular olive oil. And here we have, this is also the 2 heads of garlic. And this is still pretty whole. I didn't mash it that much. And I'm just going to take a fork and we're going to mash it up a little bit. They're really nice and soft. And we're going to use some of it today, and the rest of it also I'm going to put in a jar, and you can keep it for up to a week, adding it to items, whatever you like. I love garlic, so I'll probably be eating this a lot. Okay, so we're going to put these aside. We're going to use them later. And now we're going to do the regular pizza dough. So for the regular pizza dough, grab one more bowl. Okay. And this amount is for 1 pizza. So what we're going to do, you're going to take warm water, and this is 3/4 of a cup of water, and the yeast, and we're going to sprinkle the yeast on top. And you should just let that sit for a little bit. And then once it sits for a little bit, see this is coming to a boil. All right, once the yeast has time to sit in the water for a little bit, we're going to add the rest of the ingredients. Pizza dough is a very basic dough. We have, in addition, we have flour, salt, sugar, and olive oil. It's important for the pizza dough, you want the water to be warm, but you don't want it to be too hot. When the water is too hot, it kills the yeast. If the water is not warm enough, it's okay. It's not going to do anything to the yeast. It just may take it longer to proof and to double its size. So now that it's been sitting just for a little bit, and then lowering the heat here, we really only want it to simmer. All right, so it's sat for a little bit. I'm going to add the rest of the ingredients. So we have the flour, salt, sugar, and olive oil. And we're just going to mix that together. All right, and now that the dough is coming together, I'm kind of trying to just squish it down a little bit. And when it gets too hard to mix with a spatula, we're going to start kneading it on the surface. So I'm going to put a little bit of flour on the table. All right, we're going to take the dough out. Now, when you're working with dough, it's important, in addition to putting the flour on your surface, you also want to make sure that your hands are floured. Otherwise, it's going to stick to your hands. And dough likes to stick to dough. So as soon as it starts sticking to your hands, if you have some dough on it, it'll keep on sticking. So we want to make sure that we get it all nice and floured so that it doesn't stick. This dough is pretty soft. So it's not, it will feel a little bit sticky, but if you put some flour, enough flour on it, it'll be good. And I'm just kneading it until it is nice and smooth. If you need a little bit more flour, go ahead and add a little bit more. It'll also depend on how moist your flour is. So if flours are a little more moist, they'll need more flour to the amount of water to absorb all of the liquid. All right, so it's getting nice and smooth, and it is a little bit sticky, but it's not sticking to my hand. All right, so once we have that nice and smooth, I'm just gonna gather the rest of the flour that we have here on the counter. And I have a bowl that I've prepared, and I put just a little bit of olive oil on the bottom. You can barely even see it. And I'm just gonna make sure that the dough is completely covered. Then we're gonna cover it with plastic wrap. So you can see here, there's the two doughs. This one on the right has been sitting for about an hour. So we're gonna use that in just a couple of minutes once we have our sauce ready. We're gonna cover it, plastic.
Maura's asking, just regular flour, or can you use bread flour?
I use just regular flour. You can definitely use bread flour, or there's also pizza flour. There's little bags. It's, I think for pizza and pasta, Double O flour, I believe. It's an Italian brand. Either is fine. The bread flour has more gluten than regular flour will have. All right, so just stirring that a little bit, and we're going to quickly make the sauce. I'm just going to get the blender. All right, so for this sauce, this is a very easy sauce, and you can adjust it if you'd like. Here. All right, so the sauce only has a few ingredients. All right, so we're going to use 1 can of the whole peeled tomatoes. I'm just going to put everything into the blender. So this recipe has powdered onion and garlic. If you wanted to cook the sauce, you can go ahead and use diced tomatoes instead of whole tomatoes. And you could use fresh garlic and onion if you wanted to cook it, as opposed to using this raw. But because the pizza does get baked, you can go ahead and just make it raw. That's why it's just with the garlic and onion that is the powders. You don't have to cook it. It's going to cook as the pizza is baking in the oven. So we have the tomatoes. We have, again, the dried oregano and dried basil, garlic powder and onion powder. We have salt and pepper and olive oil. All goes into the blender. We're really just going to blend it for a little bit until it's all mixed together, and that's it. pour it back into this bowl that had the tomatoes in it. All right, so this will be enough for quite a bit. You can either refrigerate it and keep it for a little bit. You can freeze it in little bunches and then defrost it when you're ready to use them. You can do whatever you choose. So we're going to keep the tomato sauce here for just a minute. We're going to go on to the next thing. All right, so we have our cauliflower crust in the oven, and I see that the timer is about to go off, so we're going to check on it. So I'm going to stop the timer, and we're going to pull that out. If I only have All right, so it definitely needs a little longer on this end still. All right, so as you can see, put it over here. It is bubbling. Here, Lisa's gonna film it. It's bubbling. It's getting a little bigger. We want it to be a little more golden before we can flip it over. So we're gonna put it in for a little bit longer. I am going to rotate it though. That way we're making sure that if the oven is not completely even, it'll bake it a little bit more even. Okay, and now we are going to work on the other pizza. So we have, for the garlic confit, we're going to do it with vegetables. The vegetables that we're going to use, I have here 3 colors of peppers. So we have our green pepper, red pepper, and orange pepper. And I have here some asparagus and onion that I cut up. I cut it all up about the same size. It's about 1/2 inch cubes. And what I want to do, I want to slightly saute them just so it's going to be a little bit softer. I'm going to saute it all together. We don't need to saute them separately, but doing that is going to soften them a little bit before we put them on the pizza and cook them. So this way, if you wanted to do this on the cauliflower crust, then I would even roast them in the oven or saute them longer, because the cauliflower crust, once you put the toppings on, you're really only melting the cheese on top. So that's not going to get a lot of time to bake. We're going to do this one on top of the regular dough, so it will bake in the oven for a while. So I'm not as worried to saute them for too long, but I do want them to get just a little bit. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use some of the olive oil that has the garlic flavor. So it's from the garlic confit. I'm not going to use fresh garlic, but I'm going to just use this oil, and that way it's going to get that flavor a little bit. We're just going to put a little bit of oil. All right. Then we're going to turn that on, maybe. All right. Let's try that again. All right.
Dan is asking if we're going to post the recipes.
Dan, everyone else got the recipes. I will email you the recipes and make sure you have them. All right, we're gonna get that going on the other one in just a minute. Okay, so we're gonna heat this up a little bit, and then I'm going to add these vegetables. And just so you get an idea of amounts, we're not gonna use all of these vegetables. I used about half of each of the peppers, and I used maybe like 5 or 7 asparagus stems and about 1/3 of an onion. So I'm going to put all those vegetables here, and we are going to cooking up for a little bit. And while they're cooking, I'm going to start rolling out the pizza. All right, so we're gonna get them all nicely coated with olive oil. And we're gonna start rolling out the pizza. Okay, so this is set aside. I'll keep one bowl for when it's done. All right, so we have this dough that I already prepared ahead of time. Okay, and all right, so it is a bit sticky, but it's oily. So it's not going to stick to the surface. I'm actually not even going to use a rolling pin because it's so nice and soft. I'm just going to use my fingers. And once I get it a little bit bigger, I'm just going to transfer this onto the tray that we're going to bake it on, and that way I don't have to move it around too much. So I have another tray here that is already lined with parchment. I'm going to lift that up. Okay. We're just going to make a nice circle out of this. It's really easy enough just to do with your hands. You really don't have to use a rolling pin. Get something else sturdy. This dough is so nice and soft. All right, and now that I have a circle, we're going to put the toppings on. All right, so this one we're going to do with the garlic confit. So what I want to do first, I'm actually going to brush all the dough all around with that olive oil that we have from the confit. The cheese. All right, so we're just going to brush it all, and that's also going to help give us a nice brown color on the edges. All right. And now we're going to spread the garlic on top. I'm just going to make sure it's nice and mashed. And I'm going to use my fingers here because it's just much easier. Making sure that we get some of it everywhere. Okay, once we have the garlic, yeah, getting nice and dirty. All right. Okay, so there's two options here. You can either put the cheese on it and then put the toppings on top, or you can hide the toppings and put all the veggies underneath and put the cheese on top. And we're actually going to do a little test. So I'm going to put half of it. I'm going to do the cheese and put the toppings on top, and the other half we'll do the other way around. So this pizza, we're not using tomato sauce. If you wanted to add tomato sauce to it, you could definitely go ahead and also add tomato sauce to it. But right now we're just leaving it a white pizza without the tomato sauce. All right, so the vegetables are lightly sauteed. Remember, these are going to go into the oven for about 15 minutes or so now. And the oven for this pizza is set at 475, not at 425. All right, so this is really hot right now. Of course, you could also do this ahead of time and have it cool before you use it. All right, so we're gonna put veggies here. Veggies on the other side. You could add mushrooms. You really could add any vegetable you'd like. I love artichoke on pizza. That's great too.
Debbie is agreeing.
And of course, the Israeli favorite, which, you know, I mean, we put corn and tuna on our pizza.
And olives too, right? Right, Dan Bernstein?
Yeah,
Sam
green olives.
Cohen always liked corn and olives.
Yep.
You're on mute.
All right, so we're going to put, this is ready. So we have the one side that I did the vegetables and covered the cheese on top. The other side, I did the cheese and then put the vegetables on top. And we're gonna put this in the oven. This is going into 475. All right, and let's check on our cauliflower crust. Okay, so this is the point where I'm going to attempt, hopefully it'll work and be okay. We're going to flip it. Okay, so I'm taking a plain piece of parchment and carefully I'm grabbing the edges. I'm not touching the pan, 2 edges from the parchment that's underneath and holding it together, flip it. And carefully, this actually kind of helps that you have nails because I'm not physically touching the bottom here. I'm just lightly touching it to help it come off of the parchment. You do see it is slightly sticking, so this is part of the reason why I like flipping it, if you can. The center is going to stick a little more than the outside because the center isn't as baked as the outside. We're gonna take as much of that off as we can. All right, and then this really only is gonna take we're gonna put it in the oven for 5 more minutes, and then we'll put the topping on this and we'll make a nice margarita pizza out of it. All right, so this is gonna go back in. Okay, so those 2 are waiting, and I think right now what we still have the garlic confit, which is still working here. It's gonna keep on cooking. We need to stir it every now and then, and we have our other pizzas that are in the oven. For the margarita pizza, what we're going to do, put the rest of these vegetables in this bowl. The margarita pizza. Well, that's telling me to check the cauliflower crust. All right, the margarita pizza, we're going to use that tomato sauce that we made. We're going to spread that on the cauliflower crust. And we're going to add slices of mozzarella onto it. And we're just going to put that in the oven until the cheese melts. And we have some really nice basil here to put on top after. All right, so the garlic confit is still cooking, and it's really going to take about 30 minutes total to cook. You're going to see it's going to get darker. You're going to feel it as you're cooking it, and it's going to get nice and soft. We're going to use this for our cauliflower crust. Does anyone have any questions in the meanwhile? Nothing yet. All right. I'm gonna wipe up the counter a little bit. This. And we're just gonna wait about another minute or so, and then I can take out that cauliflower crust. I just wanted to get a little more cooked in the center to make sure that all around it's nice and golden and baked. All right, and this I can see is cooking a little too hot, so we want to make sure it's really only simmering while we're cooking it. You can definitely try using also, I know that you can get the pre-peeled garlic cloves. You can probably definitely try and just cooking them in some olive oil instead of standing and peeling 2 or 4 heads of garlic like I was doing. Let me know how that comes out. All right, so we're going to go ahead. I see that except for the part that kind of stuck to the parchment, the cauliflower crust needs to be much better. Okay, so we're going to spread that tomato sauce. I do want to go ahead and still brush the edges with this garlic olive oil, just to give it a little flavor and a little more color on the edges. All right, so we have that. And I'm going to take about a nice spoon of the tomato sauce. Now with pizzas, it's really important, you don't want to put too much tomato sauce. The tomato sauce is going to make the dough more soggy. You really don't need a lot of sauce. We want just a little bit for the flavor, and that'll be enough. All right, so we put that tomato sauce, and we're going to put some slices of mozzarella here. So I just bought a big piece of mozzarella and I cut it into slices. Definitely not nicest cuts, but we're gonna put one piece in the center. All right, and we're gonna put that in the oven until the cheese is melted. And I'm still leaving it at 425. Right, once that pizza, once the cheese is all melted, we're gonna add some of that fresh basil and just cut it up into pieces. Oh, timer, what's the question?
Should the mozzarella work as well as a sliced mozzarella?
Oh, definitely, definitely. The traditional margarita pizza is with the slices of mozzarella, but you can just use the shredded mozzarella instead. You don't have to use the sliced. All right, this pizza, I'm just gonna turn it around and I want you to see how it's looking. So because the dough wasn't baked, you wanna make sure it's baking for long enough for the dough to bake. So the half that we had the cheese on top, we can see that the cheese is kind of browning on top, and then the half with the vegetables looks really nice. So we're gonna put it in for a little longer. We do wanna make sure that that dough is completely baked. Okay, do we have any other questions in the meanwhile?
Yeah,
All right,
Liron,
so you can keep,
besides mozzarella, what other cheeses do you recommend on pizzas?
so if you're adding flavors to it, I like adding feta on top, also mascarpone. If you're doing, you can do, so feta I would add more with like Mediterranean flavors. Mascarpone I've done a lot with, if you put some pesto on it, it's really good. I mean, it really depends on, obviously you can add Parmesan as well. Those I really do like the flavors that they add. So you can tell, as I'm mixing the garlic, I'm kind of pressing them to the side to see if they're getting softer. This still needs a little bit longer. They are getting softer, but they're not soft enough yet. So we're just gonna let that go for a little longer. All right. And let's see how this is looking. All right, so we're just gonna give our margarita pizza about 1 more minute. The cheese is definitely melting on top. You're gonna see when we bring it out. We'll make some room. I'll put it closer to you. And then we can cut it up a little bit. Okay, we have our basil. So here, this basil is washed. And I'm just keeping it on the stem still, just in a jar still with water to keep it a little fresher for a little longer. Just because I want it to look nice and pretty. I'm cutting up a little pieces. These leaves were really nice. I know it's hard to get basil in the grocery store. I've been trying to grow it at home. It's not as successful as I would like. Here we have, let's take this off. Margarita pizza, and just gonna put a few pieces of basil on there. Right, and we have our pizza on the cauliflower crust. Right, and then we have the pizza cutter, so we're gonna cut it into, you can cut it into as many pieces as you like. Right, and our regular pizza really needs just 1 more minute. You can have them side by side. We'll cut them up, show you the slices. All right, who is planning on making pizza at home? Anyone gonna make pizza?
I'll eat some.
Debbie, I have some more dough here if you want. Dan, are you gonna make pizza for the kids tomorrow?
Tomorrow I'm making pancakes for the grandkids.
Okay.
Mickey Mouse pancakes.
Mickey Mouse pancakes. Do you have a mold for that?
I do. Tonight I made shrimp and fried rice.
All right.
Kosher shrimp and fried rice.
All right, let's check this other pizza. All right, so let's get this. So we have here our veggie pizza. And if you want to not tell your kids that it has vegetables underneath, hide it under that the cheese. They won't be able to see it. Or the veggies on top. Either way, it really works well. We kept it white with the garlic confit instead of the tomato sauce. But you can definitely add the tomato sauce if you'd like to.
Liron, you would,
Yeah.
I assume, use the same dough recipe if you wanted to make a calzone, right?
Yeah,
Or
definitely.
is there, I assume that it needs to cook longer or whatever, right?
Yeah, the calzone's gonna need to cook longer because obviously it is, double the dough with the filling inside. You want to make sure that the dough is cooked all the way through. I'm wondering, I'd have to look into it and maybe use a dough that doesn't necessarily have as much yeast, just because you don't want the dough to really be that thick. Because then it's going to be a lot of dough. So you may want to either use the same recipe but lower the amount of yeast, or make a recipe that doesn't necessarily have yeast in it. I would definitely have maybe look into it a little bit and see what what people usually use. All right, so I think I need to try this. I know I usually don't try my food, but these look delicious. Lisa, do you want some? Here, you can try the cauliflower crust. So of course, if you want it to be, here, I'll put this on. If you want it to be a little more crispy, then just cook that cauliflower crust for a little longer. I wanted to make sure that you can see what it looks like. So definitely cook that for a little bit longer if you want it to be a little more crispy on the bottom. You can make them ahead of time and, you know, freeze them if you have the space in the freezer to, you know, freeze that circle if you want to make a couple at a time. If you have a larger pan, in addition to baking it a little longer, you can also just make it thinner, and that way it'll be more crispy and not and won't be as thick. So the thicker it is, it won't be as crispy. It'll be a little softer. It's still a great crust. I really like it. And you can play around with it. You could do these toppings, the white pizza with the veggies. You could do that on the cauliflower crust. It would definitely add for the flavors. So does anyone have any other questions? I'm gonna eat this pizza here. Anyone else have questions in the meanwhile? And you can see that the bottom of it is also nicely baked. Dan, too bad you're not here to eat it.
Liron, not that I can imagine there being leftovers, but would you be able to freeze that pizza? Maybe not the cauliflower one, but would you ever
Freeze the
freeze?
pizza as is. I mean, you could, although I would always try and eat the pizza if you can, like within like a day or two. I wouldn't necessarily freeze the pizza with the cheese. You could definitely, for the cauliflower one, freeze the crust and then make it, you know, bake it another day. But I don't know that I would freeze it with the cheese and everything.
Liron, how many servings would you say each pizza makes?
So this, the regular dough, I mean, it depends on the person and if you're eating anything else with it. I mean, it's a decent sized pizza. It's definitely at least for 2 people. If this is your main meal. The cauliflower pizza, I mean, if you're talking a teenager or a male, maybe not. If you're eating something next to it, definitely 2 people. Yeah, I would make a salad next to it or something like that. And that could definitely feed at least 2 people.
So do you always need to put the basil on at the end?
Yeah, so
Because
you
I
can
put it in
see-
like when I'm baking, so should I not
You-
do that then?
No, you can do it. It's just nice and green if you add it at the end. So you can see that these leaves that have been touching the cheese have turned brown. So it's just not, it doesn't really matter. It's for aesthetic purposes to add it at the end. Yeah, it's delicious. Any other questions? Yeah? What were you saying, Dan? Should I send some for you to Virginia?
No, we live in Maryland now.
Oh, sorry.
It's still cold. It doesn't matter.
It's a balmy 70 degrees here in Southern California.
Last week it snowed here.
All right. I'm going to go back to eating. Thank you for joining us. Next week, I know some of you have already registered. If you haven't registered yet, we have the Passover class that I'm going to be doing a few items. And tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific time, Dan, so 1 to 3 p.m. your time. If you'd like to go on to our Facebook or the fitness Facebook pages, I'll be live here with Robin with our Fit in the Kitchen program. We're going to be talking about different fats, what oils to use, and we're actually going to be using the air fryer to make some fries. So please join us and feel free to watch. You can watch it later also if you like. And I think that's it. Oh, and challah, if you like March, my flavor is traditional or zatzal we're doing for March. So that's in 2 weeks. I think it comes out like March 17th or so. So you're welcome to order those. That's all on our website. All right, and if you have any other questions, feel free to email me or Lisa. I'd be happy to help or answer any questions.